My training is as a biologist, and when I started in Prospect Park in 1985, plans were afoot for the first restorations that were going to deal with what is called the ravine district. My other colleagues were more horticulturally oriented, and I started advocating for more of a ecological restoration using native plants and the like. The problem was, this was the late 1980s, there were no nurseries growing native plants, virtually none to speak of. This property was procured by the city of New York, 13 acres, including 4 or 5 greenhouses and a lot of growing space. We were up and running with our first project, which was to grow for the ravine, and in the end we grew about 750,000 plants that went into the ravine in Prospect Park. Our bread and butter is still producing plants to go out in the landscape. Most of what we grow for is for my own department, for parks, but we want to constantly make sure we're coming up with new materials, new products to meet the challenges of an urban environment. So we also experiment with things for green roofs and for things like bioswales and tree pits and everything else under the sun. The Mid-Atlantic Regional Seed Bank is an outgrowth of what we do here. So what do we put in our seed bank? We have 2 goals. First of all, we know the flora that we're dealing with. Originally, there were probably about 2,000 species to be found in New York City. Probably a little bit less than half of those species still exist. And so how they interplay with each other and evolve together through time is very critical for conservation. The problem is, of course, that we're accelerating that process. And so some species may not be able to adapt quickly enough. We want to capture as many of those species as possible, and we can draw on all those collections and hopefully get some of them that are no longer there back into environment. A big event for us, like everyone else in New York City, was Sandy. One of the really cool stories leading up to Sandy was that we had banked species, including the dune grass that holds 4 dunes in place. Its biology is such that there is detectable differences over very short distances between populations. And subsequently, those dunes were totally lost. So those populations were totally lost. And so we have worked diligently to propagate that plant and get it back out in the environment where it came from. Just 2 months ago, some of that material went to newly built dunes in Coney Island. What has really been most rewarding to me is to build this institution within an institution, in the simplest level, taking care of nature, but thinking about things like climate change in the future, and planning intelligently, and that's what my department does. And we've come a long way, and it's been rewarding to see that arc through time.